Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. You are listening to episode 168. This one's going to be entitled 4,000 Mondays. Guys, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Jamal Javanji, of course, and I'm super delighted to be back on the podcast with you today. Have an important conversation, as we always do, but I do have a little bit of a sobering but important conversation to share with you today that I feel is very important for all of us. And I have a conversation. So this episode is really going to be a conversation I recently had that I recorded with a amazing human being by the name of Jodi Wellman. But Jodi, she's a really interesting human being. She obviously is, extremely talented, she holds a master's of applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. She's also an assistant instructor there. She's been a certified coach, like an executive coach for 25 years, working, in the corporate world and helping executives and teams and high performers and that kind of thing. But she's really passionate, and she's also, works with people, individual people as well, but she's very passionate about helping people use the reality of death to spark us or awaken us to live life really well. And so she has a business called 4,000 Mondays, which I thought was very provocative, and she'll talk more about it in the episode, so I won't go into too much detail. But on average, an average human being has about 4,000 Mondays. That's it. You get about four, and that's assuming you live, according to life expectancy, right? Which we're not guaranteed that, but let's say you did, right? You have about 4,000 Mondays. So today, this podcast is being released on a Monday. I'm not sure when you're listening to it, but maybe you're listening to it on a Monday. How many Mondays have you experienced? How many do you have left? Have you thought about that? Yeah, does that seem a little bit morbid to you? Well, I'm convinced, and I have been for a long time, that having the awareness of our impending death, which, by the way, I don't think I'm saying anything inappropriate or breaking any news by saying that I'm pretty confident that you're going to die at some point. Your physical body is going to die, right? I think I'm pretty confident in saying that. I know mine is, and I know everybody. Actually, there isn't one person that that is not going to die. Literally. I know everybody knows this, but we don't really know this. We're under some spell or illusion. I'm convinced we're under some spell or illusion that it happens to somebody else, that just doesn't happen to us. And when it happens to us or death comes into our circles, it just is extremely shocking, because that shows you the level of delusion that we have been operating under. So I want to end that delusion. I want to end that sense of illusion that somehow death is not something that happens to us, or if it does happen to us, it's how could this happen? And oh my gosh, and this is crazy. It's going to happen to 100% of us, and it's going to happen to 100% of the people that you know and love, and 100% of the people you don't know and don't love, or do know and don't love. It doesn't really matter, right? Death is happening to all of us. And it's time we come out of the illusion and we embrace it for what it is. Okay? So with that said, I'd like to introduce my conversation with Jodi Wellman. But before I do that, a couple of things that I mentioned here, but I really, really want to mention it again. It's super important. Please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Specifically, if you could do it on iTunes, that'd be fantastic. Go rate us and review us. It takes just 30 seconds to a minute. You can do that on your iPhone app, or you can go to iTunes, however you do that, and just rate us and review us. Subscribe to the show as well. If you listen to your podcast on Spotify, rate us and review us there as well. But if you can primarily do iTunes, that would be fantastic. Really appreciate that. And without further ado, let me introduce my conversation with Jodi Wellman of 4,000 Mondays. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I'm really excited to get into this conversation have a special guest on the show today. Her name is Jodi Wellman. You heard all about her bio that I shared with you in the intro to this conversation, but I'm really just privileged to have Jodi on the podcast. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jamal. I am excited to be chatting with you here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, okay. So we were just talking a little bit, just for the listeners, just to get a sense of who you are. You're a new part-time California resident. So just moved out to this area and from the Midwest. So we have that in common. I'm from Ohio originally. But just for the listeners, okay. So 4,000 Mondays is the name of your business. Okay. So can you give us I know it's probably difficult to do in a short period of time, but can you give us a snapshot as to why did you start a business called 4,000 Mondays, or why did you change the name to your business to this? What is the story behind that?
Yeah, what's the story? Why all the intrigue about 4,000? And this is going to get really morbid in a hurry, but I promise we'll make it light. Because 4,000 Mondays is roughly all we get. And I find that just riveting. Like, that's the kind of thing that grabs me and shakes me hard by the shoulders. Like, that's it? Especially when you do the math. And I'm like, I think I have 1,902 left at last count. Not that I'm obsessed with it or anything. And I subscribe to a lot of the research I've done around this idea called memento mori, which is remembering that we will die. And the belief is that if we get really, really, really in tune with it and granular and calculate how much time we have left, could that be the thing? And of course, I'm biased. I say the answer is yes. Could that be the thing that allows us to live more fully, with more urgency, more of a sense of priority? And so I just have to be bold and ask you, do you know how many Mondays you have left? Should we calculate it?
That's a fantastic question. I really don't. I really don't know how many Mondays I have left. I mean, it's Tuesday now, so I might have spent my last Monday, right?
This could be it. This could be your last podcast.
Right. Interesting. But it's very compelling what you're saying here, because when we feel trapped in anything, right? When we feel like this is never going to end, this is just the way it's always going to be, we tend to look down on, or even disdainfully look at the thing we're doing with a sense of almost like it's a prison. But when we realize that this is actually really quickly, like this life is very quick in that sense, then that's a whole different perspective, right? You know? So.
Yeah, thanks for putting it that way. And you're reminding me, on my shelf here, I have all the paraphernalia, skulls, all the things, but hourglasses. And it's the same idea, right? When you flip the hourglass and you can visually see those grains of sand falling through, I don't want to cause existential crises. Mild ones I think are okay to ignite some change that some of us might need in life. But to see the grains of sand, or to see the Mondays counting down, or like you said, to gain that different perspective, how else will we wake up and stop taking our lives for granted? Because we just tend to get into a bit of a slumbering existence. And it helps us in life. I'm not, like, we need to adapt. We need to kind of get into some zones sometimes. We need to chill out. But in general, I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time realizing that we're at this point in the year. Like, where did it go?
Right.
Need to wake up.
100%. I think we all have this psychological kind of egoic structure that is trying to protect us, right? It's trying to keep us from, because, we're the only species, to my understanding, at least that we know of right now, that has conscious awareness of our own death, right? And so because of that, there's this more, I don't know, the lesser part of it. I don't see the lesser, just the more primitive nature that we have wants to get into survival mode. Wants to protect us. So we don't consciously dwell on this reality that our life is coming to an end. But what's interesting to me is that if I talk to 100%. You talk to any human being, right? You'd be hard pressed to find a person that does not know that they're going to die. If you ask somebody, hey, do you know that you're going to die someday? Everyone will say yes, but very few people are consciously aware of that on a daily basis in a conscious way. So my question, I guess, for you would be like, I don't think this just like, there's got to be a story for you as to how this became a conscious focus for you in your work and in your life. Can you tell me what happened? Like, what's your story, your personal story with death or becoming conscious of death?
Sure. Yeah. I'll be really honest with you. I always wished I had what I think would be the classic answer, which is that I almost died. Because I think that would make a great story. And all the research points to how people who have had really close brushes with death do have a really profound wake up. So while I don't have that, I have a couple of sort of adjacent tidbits. And one is that my mom died in her late 50s. And I was so acutely aware that she had so many plans and ideas and hopes and dreams that she never brought to fruition. And so I know for a fact that she was on her proverbial deathbed with a bunch of regrets. And it just felt devastating, and when I was cleaning up her place after she had died, seeing all the little, tags she had made. She was going to start a hiking stick business at one point, carving hiking sticks. And she made all the little tags but never really did anything with it. Or all the writing, the manuscripts, stories she wrote, 2 books she wrote, but not sent out. She lacked the confidence. And I know that that's the stuff that holds a lot of us back. So I became vividly aware of how, wow, I do not want to get to the end and feel like I have all these paths not taken. So that was really profound for me. And something else that's just more about me, less about my mom, is that I struggled mightily with eating disorders for a decade. And I see now with such clarity, from now that it's behind me, how that robbed me of aliveness. And I was playing small, and I was scared, and I was trying to cope and control a world that just can't be tamed. But I try, and I'm aware now that I wasn't living like I was living, I think, in black and white. I think of it like that versus waking up and living in vivid color. So those 2 things I think are part of the big impetus for me. And then in addition to really letting myself get into this and studying it for my master's thesis at University of Pennsylvania, I did the applied positive psychology master's program, and I gave myself permission to really get into this with research. And I realized there actually are fantastic theories around what you just said, Jamal, about how as humans, we are the only species to have this pending doom and awareness that we do deny, but that there is evidence that it really can help us if we tap into it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. As a coach working with people, I don't know that people would say this, but I've coined the term in some ways. I've said, hey, it seems like a lot of anxiety or anxious feelings that people have in a day-in-day basis is because they're trying to live quickly. Meaning, I always say, well, you're in a hurry to get somewhere. And people, this isn't conscious. People say, they're in a hurry, can't wait to get to tomorrow or next year, or trying to get through this, or trying to make it through the day because the day needs to get over with, because what I want is ahead of me, what I want, my goal, the next thing. And so I've heard a friend of mine recently was saying, if you're in a hurry to live, then you must get to the finish line quickly. And you know what the finish line is, right? It's the grave. So we don't think about that, but people who are in a hurry to live. So then it's a question like, well, what's the alternative to be in a hurry? The alternative would be to stop or to pay attention. To this.
So beautifully put. The pause, you're making me think. I see myself in a lot of what you've said, and a lot of clients I work with. I have this philosophy, let's call it a framework, where I think a lot of us, we do get a little consumed with the idea of wanting to live longer. And hey, that's great. I would like to live longer too, as long as the quality of my life was decent. But I like looking at life in a way, this framework where can we widen it with vitality and fun and the pleasure and the experiences? And can we deepen it? And that's the meaning side of well-being, with more of a sense of purpose, like connecting to something bigger than ourselves and, the more altruistic things. So widening it with all the fun, all the travel, all the pizza, all the hedonic, everything. Great. I want to live that life, but I also want to live the deep life, which makes me feel like I'm connected to other people and like I've been generous and all the great. So I think, to link it to what you've just said, if we're living a little bit wider day by day and a little bit deeper day by day, while consciously stopping and thinking of how many Mondays we have left and the kind of life we want to live, so that when we are at the end, we feel proud of how we showed up and didn't spend all sorts of time, riddled with eating disorders, et cetera. Not that I officially regret it, but does that allow us to slow down? Does that allow us to pause? And I think I'm going to be really honest. I think that we can actually get consumed with what we're talking about, which is stuff more in. Like I get actually a little bit worried that people might take my message and feel pressure by it. Like, well, now I have to live this really big life. I have to be on the road traveling and I have to try all the, okay, I said pizza and travel. Like, do I have to go and get the best pizza in Naples? Do I have to go and live this grandiose life that people would really admire on social media? And I think, oh goodness, no, unless that really jazzes you up.
Sure.
I think, oh my goodness, like, find the thing that makes you feel more alive, with maybe a little more width, especially since COVID has caused us to live a little narrower. Or maybe for you've had all the vitality, you're having fun, but it feels empty. So maybe it is about sizing it, like size the prize. What feels good for you? And to your point, what if you just sat in it and observed it for a while, pressed the pause button and did look around and appreciate the fact that your heart is still beating, you're alive, and use that for this perspective of, hey, what if I wasn't here, 1 year from now? What would feel really good without pressure to fit into this year of my life, or week, or decade? What did you choose the time frame?
Totally. It's so good what you're sharing. Thank you so much. We have a family member who's on hospice right now, and my wife and I were. That's okay. Yeah, and we were at spending the weekend. He's at home, and yeah, it's everybody's aware that this life is coming to an end. And we've had about 10 months with him in hospice. It's like a slow processing of this end of life. And so, in that space, so we were just there this weekend. So we were sitting, one of the most profound things. He's a very successful man, built a great business over years, done a lot of great things with his life, very busy, but now he's confined to a bed, and cognitively things are becoming, he's less and less himself in that sense. And he loves coffee. That's one of those, he's always loved coffee, but he loves it even more now. And so in the morning's kind of his time. So I was just sitting with him in the morning, and he was taking his coffee, most profound things I think I've seen in a long time. He's taking his coffee cup and he's just sitting there and he's looking at it and he's like moving it in circles. And then he'll take a sip and he'll close his eyes and he'll put it down and he'll taste it. This is a pretty vast departure from the pace of life that he's used to. But now he's just moving the coffee, and then he looks up at me. He's not really able to talk anymore or have conversation like he used to, because cognitively of a situation. But he looks up and he goes, "This is a gift. This is it." And when I just heard that, I just thought, it took the awareness of death, impending death, to pay attention to this cup of coffee, to this, even the time we were having together in the living room. But I thought about that. I thought, but I can take this with me, this experience with me, because again, we don't, not all of us are on hospice. We don't have that sense of like, oh, this is, but we all of us are on hospice, right? Are we not all
Some of it is just long and dragged out. And
right. We just we don't have the cognitive awareness of how quickly that may be. I mean, like you said, if the average is 4,000 Mondays, right?
Yeah.
Not for everybody. For some people, it's less than that. But that really struck me as he's paying attention to life now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Waking up, paying attention. It is because of the scarcity of time and perhaps his reduced ability to communicate and comprehend. But to your point about savoring, that's really what this is called. And in that moment, stopping and saying, this is a gift. This maybe he was actually being deeper, like the experience of still being alive right now, but that I get to swirl one of my very favorite things in this mug. And we all do have that opportunity. And I don't think we're all going to become fantastically excellent at it every single day. But I think that's just our task at hand, is to more often than not, like, use the conversation like this, like you have given a gift to me and to your listeners right now, Jamal, thinking about, wow, well, I get to sit back and also look out and think, I'm thinking of a client right now who loves to garden. And she said, I just find so much peace in the middle of my crazy day. I might pop outside and just go look at my tomato plant. And you know what? That's the gift in the moment. Or holding your child's sweaty little hand. Or maybe it is having a bite of the oatmeal cookie that just was your grandmother's recipe. Or, all the ways we can savor the moment that are fantastically cheap and fast, low-hanging fruit of life. It's all there for us. Yeah.
Absolutely. So good. Well, on your website, you have a quiz, right? For people going to take a quiz to determine how alive, which I find it interesting. We're talking about death here. We're talking about death awareness, but really death is a gift, right? Because death is not possible without life, right? The moment you're born, death is now a reality.
Yeah.
So I used to look at death as the opposite of life. I no longer see it that way. My understanding now is that death is actually an expression of life. Mm-hmm. It's a modality of transition. But I guess my question for you, because I know you're asking the question for folks who come to the website, how alive are you? Can you talk a little bit about the concept of being not just alive, but astonishingly alive? Ooh. What is that?
Ooh, I just love that you asked that. And a minute ago when I was referring to the idea of living wider, expanding the width of our lives with vitality, and then on the y-axis, if you could imagine a chart right now, expanding the depth of your life with meaning. Magically, you get 4 quadrants when you create like a big plus sign. And the way that it works is we end up really with, 4 different scenarios that we could live in. And I'm just going to work backwards and just say, clearly, we don't want the dead zone, which is where we're kind of minus on feeling the width and we're minus on feeling the depth. So we're not feeling like we're having much fun and we're not feeling like it really matters. So that is a dead zone. And a lot of people, we can spend quite a bit of time there, or sometimes on given days or weeks, we might dabble into that zone. Not fun. Or really, really not fulfilling at all. Sometimes we end up where we've got a lot of meaning, like maybe you are spending a lot of time with your relative in hospice, or many people are raising kids and there's deep meaning there, but maybe they're so freaking bored, right? It's like, when was the last time we went out to a concert? When was the last time we tried and went out to a new fun, like that Thai restaurant that just opened up, or, so that to me is called meaningfully bored, right? Lots of good meaning, but oh man, I just want to get out there and like live a little. And then conversely, sometimes we're having a lot of fun. We're getting out there. We're trying new things. We are feeling really wide with vitality, but we're not feeling like we have any of that important depth or meaning. And I call that vitally empty. So it's like you're having so much fun, but you're kind of like hollow, and then you feel like a shell. So we don't want those 3 zones. What we are really ideally striving for, more moments than not in life, because life is just a bunch of moments stitched together, I think, of, 10-minute increments.
Right.
So more of those are could you be in a position where you're consciously planning and arranging your life so that you say, how can I widen it? So the husband and I just booked on Friday night. We're going to go see Jim Gaffigan do comedy, his show. And that to me feels like, wow, I get to live wide, at least on Friday. And, every day till then, I'm going to be anticipating it and looking forward to it. And then as far as meaning goes, is there a conscious play to feel like we're doing something that matters? And so it's sort of like at any given moment, are you feeling at any point a little bit positive on the vitality width and positive on the meaning? That's in the zone of being astonishingly alive. And again, just to size this, it doesn't have to mean that we're living lives where, we've rented a yacht and we went and saved children in a remote corner of the world for meaning. No, for most of us, it's just the tiny little things like savoring the swirling coffee in our mug, or reconnecting with a friend from college that you've lost touch with, or, looking after yourself, deciding to sign up for a personal trainer and really just start to pay attention to your body again. And so sometimes it is just, I don't care how big or small it is, doesn't matter. It's just, are you anywhere plus on the vitality, anywhere plus on meaning? And so that makes us feel astonishingly alive.
Totally. Well, I think I love what you're saying there. And what I'm hearing you say is that so much of this being astonishingly alive is really just bringing intention, right? Bringing a level of intention to this moment. And if you have intention for this moment, it's also not disconnected from desires you have to see, let's say, maybe we do have desires for the weekend or for a vacation or whatever. That's great.
Yeah.
Because when you get present with this moment, you become present to the desire for those things, even though they may manifest in the future. You have a desire for them in this moment. So you can start planning.
So I love the research. You just made me think about something. The research that exists that shows that even if this moment isn't all that good, and luckily my moment with you right now is feeling pretty good. But let's say hypothetically, your spot in life right now, whenever that is for you, that you're kind of in it, could be a heck of a lot better. Research shows that if you are actually immersed and engaged and present mentally in whatever is going on, your overall sense of life satisfaction and well-being is perceived to be greater than even if things are fine, but you're not paying attention to what's going on and what you're feeling like.
100%.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating because I think a lot of times we think, or people think, and I get it. I get why, because we're trained to see the physical, tangible expression of something as the end all be all. But in reality, that's always secondary. Someone was explaining it to me this way, that when you look up, let's say you go out, let's say you live in a place where you can see the stars at night really clearly, and you go out and you see the sky full of stars. Well, you're actually not seeing what's present. What you're seeing is thousands and thousands of years old because it took that long before the light could show up so you could actually physically see it. But it's always that way. So if you think about it, the physical is always the past. So for example, if I eat food, right? By the time my body, it metabolizes and becomes my physical flesh and blood, I mean, it's past now, right? So same thing with anything. I was thinking about somebody, let's say two people are in love and one person decides to propose. So in that moment, they're actually dwelling on, they're moving into the manifestation of what will it look like to be in a relationship, to be committed, to have this life. So they're visualizing it, they're getting into the state of it. It hasn't happened physically in the sense of it hasn't manifested, but they are in the space of that proposing. So by the time the wedding is happening, it's the past tense of working out of that very present tense desire. So it actually starts when you move into this moment, right? Mm-hmm. That's when the thing begins to be created. As soon as you imagine and begin to move into that desire, it's already in motion.
Yeah.
And that redeems this moment that we think is quote unquote mundane or nothing's happening. It's no, there's the seeds of life or is in this moment. So I find it to be fascinating.
That is fascinating. Yeah. Love it.
Okay. So here's a question for you this is a question I've had for a long time. Some people are afraid to to really go there with death, to think about death in a conscious way, not even just think about it, but just be aware of it on a conscious way. Because this is the pushback I've gotten, is that, okay, let's say you're with your spouse, and how do you balance the sense of fear? Like when you're with them, you're like, oh my gosh, they're dying. Like there's going to be a day that they're not here with me.
Yeah.
How do you balance that sense with not allowing that awareness take away from the magic of this moment?
Such a good question. I have so many thoughts swirling. Okay, so I'm just going to start quickly. I want to tell you a unfunny anecdote. My husband obviously has to entertain me. He knows what I'm all about and, the business I'm in and what I like to think about and talk about. So one day, this is back in Chicago, we had a special night out and we went to a restaurant. It was in Westtown. And I said, honey, congratulations. This is your half-life anniversary. Because I did the exact math. And so men die on average at 78. And he at that point was 78 divided by 2. And it was, however it worked out, he was on that day, I calculated it was his half-life. And of course, it didn't go over exactly the way I'd anticipated. He wasn't as gleeful as I was that like, let's celebrate life. Of course, he's like, why are you being a downer? Anyway, that might be an example of what not to do right off the bat. I will share with you, your point around as animals, we as humans, we're aware, there ain't no spoiler alerts. We get it. And so what does happen when we do consciously think about death, it depends how we think about death. It will either trigger us to be productive and do good things with it, or kind of become less desirable versions of ourselves. And so I think I'm going to try and make this super, super succinct. So there's this thing called terror management theory. I just find it fascinating. And it's this idea, if we have these sort of random abstract reminders of death around us. So let's say you are out and a funeral procession drives by, or you walk by a funeral home, or you're just watching like any Liam Neeson movie and there's like, death and carnage, or you talk to a friend randomly who mentions that they visited their relative in hospice. And so we're surrounded by it all the time. But when we have these just sort of like oblique references, it ignites this terror really subconsciously for most of us. And it does one of two things for us. It makes us tend to want to double down on our worldviews, because if we can affiliate in some way with either your political party or your school alumni or the sports team you believe in, or the fact that you are an orthodontist, and if you can really, really affiliate with whoever it is that subscribes to your same worldview, symbolically in your mind, it acts as a little bit of an anchor. Like there's a little bit of an immortality sort of notion there. It's hard to follow, but this is what we do. So we maybe become a little more aggressive with our views and intolerant of others' views.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
There's no surprise.
We're trying to attach to something that's going to go on beyond us. Is that kind
perfectly
of perfectly
put? That's the best summary I've ever heard. And so let's just not make this a political show all of a sudden, but gosh golly, the collision of world global pandemic and massive political turmoil in the States going on at the same time was just it's a breeding ground. Like that was a case study. Right? It's almost like researchers arranged that. And so then in addition to doubling down on your worldview, most people will also want to bolster their self-esteem because it does make them feel important. And in some ways, like you said, attached to this thing that they value. Those typically don't lead to really great human behaviors. And so I'm just going to put that aside for a second and say, let's not do the oblique reference to mortality. Let's do the really deliberate, concrete, stop, pause, sit with your partner, sit with a friend, sit and go, let's do the math. How many Mondays do we have left? And then you really stop and you go, okay, well, if we take a big trip every 4 years, how many big trips really do we have left in our lives? Like really stop and analyze and think about it. Really stop and analyze. The work I do with individuals and teams and groups is stopping and becoming hyper aware of what regrets might you have right now in the making, so that if you were on your deathbed, you'd feel really lousy you didn't course correct that regret, because we can mostly course correct most of our regrets, right? Because most regrets are about things that we haven't done yet, long to do and haven't done.
Yeah.
And so living a life that's conscious about waking up to the fact, this is it. And I'll actually say that the deeper we go, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, the more often we do it, it's actually the very thing that can set us free. So Irv Yalom is an existential psychologist. He's kind of my superhero. And he has this quote that though the physicality of death destroys us, the idea of death saves us. And he works, well, he used to, he's 91 now, but he worked for a living with helping people with existential concern and anxieties that do emerge. And the idea is to really go there, like really dive into it and stop and pay attention to it and see what that can offer you. And provided that you stop and say, and like, what came up for me when I really did think about that feeling of having a limited amount of Mondays? What was something that made me feel, was it that a yearning that I haven't connected with people in my life enough? Or was it that I haven't written the book, or that I haven't pursued these hobbies that I think are really kind of cool talents that I've let go dormant? Like whatever it is that comes up for you, grab that and take it and run with it. Or at the very least, walk quickly with it, and do something with it. Because those are the sparks, I think, the embers of aliveness amidst, a relatively uncomfortable thought of your time is ticking, your hourglass. How, like, I say I have 1,902 or 3 Mondays left. Like, I could be gone next week, just like we joked about earlier. We all could. And so I'm not helping the matter here, am I? By alleviating an anxiety. This is ironic, because I think that we think that if we want to alleviate anxiety about the bitter end, it's to not think about it. But actually, research is very clear that by not thinking about it, we're just making it worse.
Totally. Now, and what I'm hearing you say is there's two ways to respond to this quote unquote crisis, right, of death. One way is to double down and become dogmatic, and in our attempt to extend our life, because we're going to attach ourselves to some external belief system or movement or whatever to try to. Really, it's to say, okay, I want to make sure my life goes on and has some kind of meaning. Yeah. But the other way, and that doesn't produce good, like you said, doesn't produce the best of human behavior. The second way, though, that this can work for us is if it causes us to pay attention to this moment at a much closer experiential level, there's no anxiety in this moment. Because anxiety is a thought of the future, right? Isn't that what's making us afraid? Oh, this person will be gone, or this I'll lose my, whatever it is. But this moment, okay, yes, that's coming. We understand that's the trajectory. But this moment, let me pay attention to this moment. Now, that's where our life is saved, right? This is where we gain our life, because that's where life is. It's in this moment, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So really, this is so good, so important. Even death, I read a fascinating book a long time ago called Life After Life. And it was written by a medical doctor who documented 100 people who had clinically died and had been resuscitated. And they had actually had, which is a whole other subject, they had actually had experiences post-death beyond their body. Yeah. And they were able to recount certain situations that this doctor said, okay, this is not technically possible. However, so he just wanted to tell their stories without commentary, just tell their stories. So one of the things, almost consistently with all 100 cases, people were surprised. The people who had died, and obviously they were resuscitated to come back to talk about it, but they were like, oh, we were surprised. And they were like, what surprised you the most? They thought, well, I'm still present of this moment, even in the act of death and the going through the death. They were conscious of this moment. And they're like, we thought that somehow would be different, but it was still this moment. Which is a fascinating concept. It's just a fascinating thought here of that actually doesn't go away, no matter what you experience. Yeah, this moment is always this moment. Which is, and it's profoundly peaceful.
It does sound peaceful.
Awareness. It does. And which you do see people going through the death process, right? Like my family member that's in hospice, like there's a new level of peace that, why peace? Because it forces you, like he's looking at the coffee, he's looking at this moment, and with a heightened sense of attention. And that just that will bring about peace, because that's the absence of that is the anxiousness, right? It's this idea of time. Oh, I'm trying to get to the next thing, but really there is no time. Time is a mental construct, right? Really what we're talking when we say 5 minutes or 10 minutes, we're this 5 minutes closer to the grave, 10 minutes closer. We're talking about our life, not time. That's what time is. It's just a measurement of life.
Yes.
The life process. So
yeah, that
so
the
good.
stories about the cognizance of the moment is really fascinating. It's neat how you've kind of tied that through our conversation. And so, yeah, maybe it's the combination of this memento mori practice, right? Of thinking of the fact that at the end, can that sharpen us and to be more, not just aware of all the time between now and then, because I think you are right that it gets us into I'm a good fan of planning. I do believe that well-lived lives, it's unfortunate they don't just happen to us. Like we do actually have to be conscious and plan for them. And that requires thinking into the future. But I have, I think it's like always, it's this balance of having a little bit of time to reflect back in time, like savoring what went well, looking at photos of good old times and trips and weddings and times that were lovely. And, oh, look at that cat that we used to have, like all the great savoring, but not a lot of time there. And then there's a time spent pre-savoring, so planning for and anticipating the good stuff that we're going to do, because now we've been even more motivated and we're aware, wow, if I've only got this much time left, I am going to book that trip to British Columbia and do the things I want to do. So that's good time spent. And then you're right. Well, the rest of your life is like, it's living it now. And so how do you want that to be? That I think that's worth reflecting on, so that when you're near the end, when you're in hospice, and I like your reference to how we are really in just one long drawn out hospice, but when we're really in hospice, how do we want to look back and go, wow, I was there. Like I showed up for my life and I was there in the moments, good and bad and otherwise. Because the good news I think we know is that it's through sometimes the turmoil and the loss and the upsets that's where meaning is actually born. And so let's not I don't think we're naively expecting us all to just sit in the moment and it's all going to be joyful and we've just enjoyed the best dish of our life. No, it's that sometimes we just have to sit in the moment and appreciate that right now it sucks really badly. And I'm going to be here for it. I'm not going to try and numb or cope by plugging into Amazon or Netflix or all the things. I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
And this is the experience of life.
Because the quote unquote sucky moments are contrasts, right? They're there to be like the old TVs. If you remember, like that you needed contrast to make the picture sharp. And that's shadows, right? And if it was all light, you wouldn't see anything. So it's this idea, like if this moment if I'm experiencing something uncomfortable in this moment, it's for contrast. Something's being shown to me here in this contrast, so I can accept that too. But Jodi, thank you so much for, you're providing a service to the world that is invaluable. Like there's just bringing our awareness, just the title of your 4,000 Mondays, I find to be really, really, really necessary. And I appreciate the gift you're bringing to the world, the awareness you're bringing to the world through your work. How can people get in touch with you or just, take you in and get in contact with the work that you provide?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words and resonance that you were both feeling around 4,000 Mondays. And that's kind of where to find me is 4000mondays.com. I live there inside the internet in that website. And so there's a way that you can get in touch with me personally or just peruse. I do a blog post every Monday. So happy to connect. Yeah.
And there's a quiz on there. Everybody could take the quiz, 4,000. How alive are you? Right. So 4000mondays.com. Thank you so much, Jodi. This is fantastic. I really appreciate you and your work.
Great. Thank you. Been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise. Take care. And thank you guys for listening. Until next time. Bye-bye.
you.